Begging for nuclear war. North Korea claims Washington is seeking all-out conflict, just days after Pyongyang tests a new missile it says can hit anywhere on the US mainland. Plus, among the stories that shape the week on RT, suicide at The Hague, as a former Bosnian-Croat general swallows a vial of poison after his 20-year sentence for war crimes is upheld. The French president calls for military action against human traffickers in Libya, but critics say he has no right to intervene because the country's not yet recovered from the destruction inflicted by the NATO-led intervention of 2011. And the World Cup battle lines are drawn for football's finest as the teams discover who they're up against in Russia next summer. Hi there, it's your 7-day summary of the biggest stories as reported right here on RT over the past week. My name's Colin Brave. First bringing you up to date on more recent developments, though. North Korea says the US is begging for nuclear war. The statement comes just days after Pyongyang launched a new missile which it says is capable of reaching anywhere on the US mainland. It caused quite a reaction from Washington and also a counter-proposal from Russia.
The dictator of North Korea made a choice yesterday that brings the world closer to war, not farther from it. And if war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed.
The Americans should start with explaining their intentions to us all. If they are really looking for an excuse to destroy North Korea, as the US envoy to the UN said at a Security Council meeting, let them spell it out clearly and let the US leadership confirm it. Then we will decide how to react.
According to both North and South Korea, the missile reached an altitude of 4,500 kilometers before landing in the Sea of Japan. Now, that's more than 10 times higher than the orbit of the International Space Station. Right after the launch, South Korea staged its own missile exercise. It took place close to the border with the North. Ilya Petrenko was at the Valdai Discussion Club in Seoul this week, where Russia presented its own roadmap out of the crisis.
What has been Donald Trump's approach to sorting out the North Korea crisis in a nutshell?
He is a sick puppy. We are totally prepared for the second option. That's called the military option.
The distance from here to the border with North Korea is only about 40 kilometers. And once you end up in Seoul, which is well in the firing range of Kim's artillery, you can't help looking at that rhetoric from a different perspective, especially if there is what you'd call a totally different approach.
There's absolutely no alternative to dialogue, but in order to start that dialogue, everyone has to stop, take a deep breath, and a step back from the red line which we're almost at.
Why can we hope that the only option, according to Moscow, will prevail? So, Russia's been saying, hey, we've got a plan. Step one, North Korea should completely halt its missile and nuclear tests. For the US, that means an end to almost non-stop war games with Seoul. Moscow calls it a double freeze. Step two might be very tough. Direct talks between Washington and Pyongyang on rules of peaceful coexistence. And finally, they should lead to step three, establishing a security framework for the entire region, with every player involved.
What do you think about the Russian roadmap?
I think that the proposal is very realistic, flexible. I hope on the occasion of Pyeongchang Winter Olympic, all the parties concerned, particularly between North and South, would come up with a more self-restraining behavior. North Korea knew that the military option is always on the table. Therefore, by putting the military option on the table, it's not likely changing North Korean behavior.
As the advisor of the South Korean president, what do you tell him about the drill?
I personally favor engagement, dialogue and negotiation with North Korea. And some people in the government may have different ideas.
Others openly reject Moscow's plan, like the neighbors in Tokyo, who simply can't imagine security without the drills with their allies. So for now, South Koreans have no other choice but to welcome U.S. Raptors and co. for the Vigilance Ace War Games. Anyway, for those who live in Seoul or who are here to talk about keeping the peace in Korea, there's something to bear in mind. be it for war games or real strikes that would put millions of lives at risk. The decision to send, let's say, warplanes to the Korean skies may depend on one single man, miles and miles away, on the other side of the Pacific.
Well, Eric Sorotkin, who's from the Lawyers for Demilitarization and Peace in Korea, believes that we're on the brink of a full-blown conflict.
At a time in which there is this standoff and this misunderstanding and lack of communication, creates a very volatile situation. It may be seen somehow as intimidating, but these have never worked. The proposal that anyone who cares about peace in the region is putting forth right now is that these military options are not realistic, and you need to sit down at the table. And when they do those exercises, something could be mistaken as invasion, something could be mistaken as live attacks and such. And so we put the millions and millions of people in the Seoul area, in South Korea, in Japan, and other places at risk. This seems like folly and foolishness when we have such a volatile situation.